Fun.
What is happening, everyone? Welcome to another fun episode of Coffee and Commerce, where we push the conversation of commerce forward, or something like that. Today, I'm joined by one of my esteemed colleagues, John Terrana, who we know as JT, the EVP Media Solutions of VaynerMedia. Thanks for joining us today, John. JT.
Pleasure. Happy to be here, Zubin. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you as well. I feel like it's only been 12 hours since I started.
Exactly.
JT, tell us about yourself. Tell us about yourself growing up and then career-wise and how you ended up where you are now.
Oh, man, growing up. Let's see. So Long Island kid. So grew up there my entire life. And then have been in Manhattan now for 12 years. So native New Yorker. Have never left. Classic big Italian Long Island family where like the gravitational pull of having like 40 relatives in 20 minutes driving distance of each other on Long Island. Like you can't get much further than Manhattan from that squad without getting in serious like grandparent trouble. But that's where I grew up, went to college there. Super fortunate enough to like at a very young age be like, I want to do this advertising thing. Went to school for that. For the longest time.
What intrigued you about it to begin with?
It was literally it's not even an intriguing story, but it's my sophomore year of high school. You're allowed to like take electives, and I took a marketing elective, and I was fascinated by this like notion of getting up in front of a room and pitching like the big creative idea. And for the longest time, I thought I was going to be like a creative account person. Intern for that, started at Deutsch Advertising in New York on the creative side. And then a couple of years in, I was like, we had an integrated media department at the time. I was like, oh man, like all the data and all the business results is over with the media folks. And it fascinated me. This is like back when like display retargeting was just starting. I was crushing it. So gravitated towards there naturally. That coincided with like the birth of Facebook APIs and Facebook advertising. Found my way into that space for about 8 years at a company called Social Code. Huge, tremendous run there. A lot of fun seeing that space grow up. And then I joined Vayner in January this year. So about 9 months in, help run our media squad, all things planning, buying, analytics are some way involved in my world, and also spend a lot of time coordinating with other leaders in the VX family, like yourself, Zubin.
Yeah, it's incredible that we met a few months ago, and I feel like we've been for years. We've been on so many things together, but it's fantastic because I've learned quite a bit from you, and I think that the audience. The goal for today's episode, obviously, we've got a lot of Q&A coming up. But before we get to the audience Q&A, I've got a bunch of questions for you because our audience is split, right? You've got people that are fascinated by e-commerce and want to get into it. You've got folks that are they've started a few years ago, they're doing well, but they're kind of plateaued or they're looking for that next thing. And then you have brands of significant scale that tune in. And I'd love to pick your brain around those things. But before we go there, you mentioned when you were younger and standing up and pitching, and you reminded me of a story. When I was just getting started, I was my first meeting. One of our there was a company we met. It was a production company, and at the time I was just making websites by myself. And so they took me to Kenwood, USA, to a meeting with them. And then all these guys are like literally there were three of them and me. And I was 18 at the time. The three of them were in like t-shirts, shorts, casual. I was in a full 3-piece suit with a tie. And when we saw each other, they're just like, what the fuck? I think at that point they realized that I wasn't as old as they thought I was. And they're like, what the fuck is this guy doing with a suit on? So we went in there, and as we sat there and we were presenting to a lady named Sally House, remember her name? She was running marketing over there. And we sat there and I was mostly listening, and I'm like, this is where I fucking want to be. This is where decisions are made. This is where the influence happens. And I remember sitting back and thinking, this is where I want to be.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And ironically then from like, I think right when I hit 30, I stopped wearing suits. Like I would wear a tie to work every day I think, until I was about 30.
Right.
Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Now, in terms of what I was getting at and the audience. So there's a reason why the show is called Coffee and Commerce and not Coffee and E-commerce. I think what we've recognized for a long time, and the world is recognizing it now, is that it's a connected world. It's omni-channel. It's not a matter of what am I doing online and let me just stay in one channel. It's a multi-threaded, multi-channel environment. So with that being said, let's start with those three audiences that I mentioned. So let's start with the folks that are listening in, that are tuning in, that are like, look, I've got this product, I've got this thing. What advice do you have for them from a media perspective, an advertising standpoint, when you're just starting out? Let's share some secret sauce with the audience.
Yeah, it's a great question. So my advice is, as quickly as you possibly can, gain an intimate understanding of the social platforms and the platforms where all consumer attention is, right? So there's the obvious ones, like a Google or a Facebook, YouTube, things of that nature. But I mean, what's happening with COVID in this year, there's just more and more, right? Like everyone knows about the explosive growth of TikTok. LinkedIn is massive. And when I say intimate knowledge of those platforms, I mean from all angles, right? So there's, of course, everyone has now their own self-serve ad platform and an understanding of that and the way the mechanics of it work, but also trends around content that's working and what's popping, trends around what types of customers are found on each platform and the role that platform plays in the customer's lives and like what's really expect. And then please, before you spend a dime, do some testing on the organic front. There's like, everyone knows the state of, Facebook, IG, or organic traction, things like that. Facebook really not so much IG. It's just not where it used to be. And there's sort of I think a mystique when people are first entering the space of like, oh, I need to spend, I need to pay to play. Yeah. Certainly the case a lot on Facebook. But man, I'll tell you, like you could do some serious damage organically on LinkedIn. You could do some serious damage organically on TikTok. You can go and create your own content and stream that on any platform now, whether it's YouTube or otherwise. Like you can really taste each platform, learn each platform, get some great creative and audience learnings even before you spend $1. And then what happens there is like there's this magical accelerant, right? You go out to market with your first $1 and you're doing it against your base of learnings, and it just starts to compound what you're currently doing. So, I would say really go in smart, learn as much as possible, because in those initial phases, you can go a long way with a very, very, little sum of money on a lot of these platforms.
No, that's fantastic advice. I think that what I got out of that is the focus of being a practitioner, and the fact that instead of hiring somebody, getting somebody else to do stuff for you, this is like this channel discussion around advertising, and the fact that, because what's strange is it's not just advertising, right? These are also the channels you're directly selling on. And so it's almost like saying you're going to go and you're going to start selling things on the street. You're going to start selling whatever, like you're in you do a little pop-up, or you're literally selling stuff on the street. And what you're saying is go and start to sell things on the street. Don't expect someone else to come in and go sell your stuff, because you're not going to learn that way. You're not going to have that intimate knowledge, and you're not going to be able to connect with the community and build that community for yourself.
Yeah, and it's start where it makes sense for your business and the audience. If you have a big Gen Z product, go heavy on TikTok from the outset.
If you have a rundown of the different platforms and where you feel like the emphasis should be.
In terms of just attention,
the audience attention. Like if you're this is where you go. If you're that, this is where you go.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple examples because to run through them all. But if you're 45 plus year old, females in particular, Facebook, right? Like Facebook, they're still on Facebook. The video formats, Gary Vaynerchuk always says like Facebook's the new TV. Very much so true. Tremendous platform. There's a lot of audiences on Facebook, but really 45 plus year olds absolutely crushing on that platform. TikTok, Gen Z, younger audience. There's a phenomenon happening right now where TikTok's actually growing so fast it's aging up. All the Gen Z folks are kind of pulling their parents into the platform. So there's other pockets there. We've kind of seen a lot of our campaigns go from 18 to 25 to 35-year-olds, and sort of just adding more audience there, but certainly still younger. Pinterest, moms, anyone, and also think about Pinterest as the role that plays in folks' lives, very much so a planning platform. If I have a larger price point item that I know is going to take 1, 2, 3 months for someone to consider to purchase, it might be my $5,000 couch because I just moved, I'm pinning it to my board, anything like that, where someone's doing a lot of planning, but super heavy female. YouTube, you can pretty much get anyone, but the thing there is the way that the platform works, any product that's demonstrable really crushes. So if you're a beauty brand and you're able to be face to camera applying some product, if you have a product that's heavy technology, like you see what some of the mattress brands do on YouTube all the time, right? Like really get into it of like, this is the shit that makes up the foam that goes in our mattress. Like that plays well in that format. So it's a combination of things. It's matching your product to the audience first. And that's the way I always encourage folks to think about it. And then getting to platform and then designing based on the audience and platform, the contextual content that works in that environment. So it's very much so I think people default to say, oh, I got to be on this channel, I got to be on that channel. I would think about it more sequentially of who's my product designed for, where are they? And then I start sliding the contextual content.
Awesome. So now I've spent 6 months to a year doing this. I've grown. I started from zero. Now I'm doing 1 to 5 million in direct to consumer revenue. And I've mostly been running social ads. And now I'm thinking, okay, do I need to hire an agency? What do I need to do? What is that next step for me?
It's a great question. I would say this, right? Like most of the brands that we engage with that are at that 1 to 5 mark have built the business on 3 things. It tends to be Facebook, Google search, and affiliate. Like particularly in the world of e-commerce, like those are the 3 things that always are sort of in the mix. There might be other pockets of stuff. Then I would say to get to the next level, I always advise us to focus on is your audience and data strategy, getting that airtight. Because what's happened is that Facebook was like the OG platform that allowed you to take all of your audience data, look-alike model off of it, slice and dice it, and really sort of get incredibly smart with the way they run ads fueled by a brand's data. Every other platform based on Facebook's growth has been like, oh, that was really smart. We want to release similar types of functionality that allow you to enter a biddable marketplace based off of audiences. And because of that, it's so important to get your first party data strategy right, because you can look at your first party data strategy as a foundational layer across every single platform, right? And being able to go back and having a tight CRM strategy just makes you so much smarter as you enter every single marketplace in terms of not just suppressing current customers, modeling off of the most high LTV customers, recapture all those things. So at that stage, I always say, if your audience data strategy is not tight, please get it there. And then go ahead, Zubin.
And for those that don't know about the audience data strategy, can you break it down a little bit, explain it, and let us know kind of when you're talking about getting it tight, what does that actually mean for them?
Yeah, the simplest form would be understanding who your customers are and as much information as you can about them. So within let's say I have a million email records, I want to understand exactly who my top 10% are and the highest LTV folks, because they're my workhorses. And I know if I can go and double that customer record volume and get double the amount of people that are my highest revenue drivers, my business is going to crush. I want to understand the opposite end of everyone who's been a one-time purchaser, and how do I get them stickier, right? How do I recapture them and increase purchase frequency? And then everything in between. If you're a retail business, the data is super clean, right? In terms of cart size, category that I'm purchasing on, all those things that I basically append to one customer record and then start to group together to be foundational to the way I think about targeting audience populations. It's imperative to the way any e-commerce brand goes out to market. And also that audience data layer becomes foundational to how we at Vayner think about building things like cohorts. We like to think that we're monitoring social conversations, taking comments in real time, all sorts of signals from the marketplace. But generally in the world of commerce, all of them are tied back to some foundational data layer that fuels our campaigns.
Got it. So I'm starting out. The advice is get out there, start organic, start to create some content, start to put messaging out about your product or products, and try to get an understanding of what's resonating, right? Without spending a penny. Then you start to add some lighter fluid, as you mentioned, and you know kind of what's working from a content messaging standpoint. You're starting to understand why people want your product. And then the next step is, who are those people? And when you look at all of those people, who are the people that actually love your product, love your brand, and are purchasing it more frequently than others, and start to, again, in that second phase, start to look at that data and that customer data, because you were trying to,
and that's going to be the next step, which is not just acquiring customers, but acquiring the right customers. So as Coffee and Commerce, you all talk about CAC and LTV all the time. So I'm sure this audience is educated on that. But truly, like, when you get smart about that and understand that, you know, I might want to acquire this customer for $40 versus someone else for $20, but the $40 customer is going to come back and purchase from me 2 or 3 times more throughout the year, and they're going to pay off in a much bigger way and get me in the black versus the red. That's tremendously huge.
No, and I think you just answered the third part of that question, which is, I'm now a scaling business 20 million plus. What is the advice? And I think the advice is specifically what you mentioned. It's around identify those customers that are actually needle moving, those that are going to stay with you, and those that, to your point, I think this is a very critical point, that you're spending more to acquire. Not to say you have to spend more, but to allow yourself to spend more to acquire them, because ultimately they're going to be far more valuable to your brand.
Yep, exactly right. And then it unlocks a whole world of modeling, right? In terms of customers that come off of this platform with this message in this age range demo, you know, it just unlocks all sorts of interesting data to feed back into the original foundations of the campaign. And that's really so funny. Like in theory, a lot of this is so doable.
Yeah.
Actioning off of this always tends to be like the hurdle, you know, in terms of like, is the data stored in the exact right place? Am I really patient enough to say, I want to acquire someone for 1.5x because I know they're going to pay out in 6 months or 9 months? Patience in the game of CAC versus LTV is just so huge and so fascinating to me.
And JT, final 2 questions for you, and then we'll go to the audience. In terms of that patience, in terms of spending, when we're looking at the data side of things, right? So we're talking about, you get set up, you go organic, then now you're spending a lot. Talk to us about content and creative and the sheer volume of content and creative that is required, some actual numbers to find meaningful scale.
Yeah, generally the philosophy is you can't test enough content and you can't test enough creative. In particular, if you're a commerce business and you can get clear signals on your DTC presence, you know, we're talking about, you know, cost per acquiring customer purchases for 10, 20, 30 bucks. And then you have all the upstream signals. That's more than enough data where we're talking about $100, $200 against one asset can determine whether or not that creative is better than the foundational set you're currently working with. And if A is better than B, is better than C. So with that context, you know, if you're a DTC business, you have the opportunity to go out and test 100, 200, 300 items per week. We have some advertisers work with at Vayner who we've taken from, you know, the quote unquote basics of I want to have my 2 or 3 best pieces of content with 95% of my media spend to, you know, that still might be correct. And we still might get to that point, but to get to the 2 or 3 best, we want to test 400 different things. And those 400 different things are $50 to $100 worth of spend against specific audiences across all platforms with very, very highly contextual relevant content. And it's just the ability to unlock data on some of these platforms. In a way, the learnings are almost as valuable as the results themselves.
Well, and just for the audience, I mean, look, we're talking about volume of content that's hard to produce without support. However, I think one thing that you mentioned that's really critical here is you're testing, say, 400 pieces of content, but you're spending about 50 to 100 bucks a pop, which translates to the fact that you can get meaningful results and insight by spending $50 to $100.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. There is, on most of these platforms, there's 2 sides of the equation. that it's 50%, well, 51% performance, 49% insight sometimes, and they all kind of come together. But and for anyone who's sort of in the audience, the content doesn't need to be like beautifully produced, and like you don't have to go and hire some expensive creative agency. Like I even think about if I were to start a brand, like the model of the Dollar Shave Clubs or the Good RXs of I'm the founder speaking to camera and being like, I founded this thing. And let me tell you all the reasons why I believe this is so great. And all the features and all the love and care and thought I put into it. That's great content. And you could do that on your iPhone in your living room, and you can do that 10 times a week.
It's interesting that the Kickstarter style video ended up taking over. I mean, people were doing that on Kickstarter because they wanted to invest in me, invest in my company, invest in what I'm doing. And it worked there. And then what do you know? It works elsewhere. Similar to TikTok videos that worked on TikTok, and now folks are using them on Instagram and whatnot.
Of course.
Final question for you, then we'll go to the audience. For those that are starting out their careers and they're looking to hone their kind of intangibles, if you will, what are a few things that you look for when you're hiring?
Yeah, it's fine. We're in the process this year of bringing on probably about 40 or so residents that are all going to be analysts as part of the media team. And literally, it's a 3-month program. If anyone's interested, hit me up. Where you come in and we teach you all the basics of the platforms and all the principles around optimizations and things like that. We've done that enough that there's some foundational things we look for in terms of like, folks that we're looking to bring on. If you're going to get into the media buying game, there's a couple things. Understanding of basic math and wanting to be able to get your hands dirty with math, whether that's like pivoting data and be able to do like simple things around CPA, CPC calculations, and understanding of the platforms themselves. It's really easy now, like really, really easy. To be able to go and just for free take a Facebook blueprint class, a Twitter flight school class, and just learn those platforms. And then literally so many folks that we've talked to now start their own business, and all these platforms have ad credits. If you're a small business, you can go to Google and apply or Facebook and apply, and they'll give you $100, $200 of free ad credits to actually start to mess around yourself with the platform. So you can start a drop shipping website and go ahead and do that all day long just to build the skill, which I find to be fascinating. And then the best folks are the ones who are able to apply the thinking outside of just media principles themselves. So start to tie the content to the math piece together in the context of the audience and the platform itself. And then you really have something that's like special there in terms of being able to think about it 360.
Brilliant. Let's jump into questions.
Please.
All right. First question comes in from IG Bad Andy Art. How should visual artists be executing e-com? I sometimes feel overwhelmed building a website, Shopify, at Big Cartel. There's so many options. I know it would distill down to self-awareness, but what would some things to consider to pull the trigger and drive traffic?
All right. There's so many options.
So I think let me get started and then
go for it.
I think the critical thing is understanding where your audience is and how you can reach them, right? I think one of the interesting things about this, and I've seen artists do this, is they'll build an Instagram profile. They'll get a good amount of following there. They'll show their craft. They'll do all that. And then they'll basically ask people to DM them if they want to purchase anything. To start there, to start having that conversation. Why did you like my art? What do you need? It's like to get an understanding of those folks, and then understand, do I go sell through a third party? Do I sell on Shopify? Where do I sell? But creating that one-to-one relationship, I think, is really critical, especially in the art world.
Yeah. Back to the points around content. Like if you're an artist, talk about like amazing content, right? Like it's unbelievable legs there to be able to Zubin's point, share that with folks. And then you don't even, I wholeheartedly agree, you don't even need a website. It is about like literally within, whether it's a TikTok or an Instagram post, just allowing folks to go and DM you and really get into the rhythm of posting your art on a regular cadence and building that demand and allowing folks to reach out. And that gives you enough data to then start to understand what people like and don't like, and then that becomes the foundation of your actual e-com presence.
Awesome. Next question. comes in from Noah and Tiso. Hey, Zubin and John, I have a D2C baseball card subscription box. Any tips for a subscription-based e-com business? It's been growing like wildfire. Congrats to you, Noah.
This is literally, this person's like reaching into my soul. Zubin, I don't know if you know this, but I've re-entered the sports card market in a big way. I was like a childhood collector, like literally would build sets upon sets upon sets. In the past 2 years, as the market's exploded, have gotten super deep back into the game. Probably have in my apartment right now about 700-800 cards or so that I need to get busy on selling. So anyway, I love this question.
So Gary's able to influence you then.
Exactly. Exactly. And whoever is asking this, if they want to hit me up at jt@VaynerMedia.com just to learn more, I'd be fascinated by it. In terms of the subscription model. So there's all these businesses around the hobby sort of popping up. And this certainly sounds like one of them. My advice to any subscription business, whether it's cards or not, is back to the original points around CAC and LTV. In particular, on subscription, your ability to have payback periods around retention rates and really model that out is so super key. Have seen a ton of subscription businesses unprofitably acquire customers and start to understand, and then over a 3, 4, 5, 6 month period, start to understand that all those customers they acquired in month 1 wind up canceling and not paying back over time. So the tighter you can get around that upfront is incredibly key. And then my other piece would be the point of entry into subscription businesses really matters. Like the first box that shows up really needs to hit a home run, pun intended, with that user, and understand that that's something they're going to enjoy getting and want to see in months 2 or 3. So the point of entry is so key. And the sharper you can get on that initial experience being exactly honed to the customer that's receiving the box, based on any data you're able to glean from them in between how they entered your site, what you're capturing in lead form, things like that, I just think is mega important.
Fantastic advice. Let's go to our next question. It comes in from Ask Academy Jamaica. How can companies in countries with limited access to online payment providers, Stripe, PayPal, etc., use e-commerce to its full potential? Cash on delivery, any experience, thoughts, biggest conversion killer? Any thoughts here?
I'm going to give this one to you first, Zubin. I feel like this is more you than me.
Yeah. I saw this question earlier. What's interesting about this question is I think that the best way to think about this, not knowing what is and isn't available in one market or another, is to just go back 15 years in this market and look at the fact that the sites we were building 15 years ago were not transactional sites. They were all informative sites, and they were all almost to the point of sales where someone would have to contact you, et cetera. When we're thinking about cash on delivery, et cetera, those things work, but then you got to change the entire the pack architecture, right? Because you're not going to sell something for $2 and have to go pick it up. It doesn't make any sense. So I almost think about this as potentially a bulk order type scenario where you have minimums that make it feasible for you to do cash on delivery or something of that nature. And then eventually, once those options become available, then you shift into a more one-to-one direct-to-consumer model.
That's awesome. Yeah, the one thing, it's an area where I need to more deeply educate myself, because everything's becoming shoppable, right? Like if you look at what's happening on Instagram shops,
totally.
Facebook's making like massive investments in Jio in India. It's just frictionless payments going to become a thing, and it's going to be integrated platform direct. And probably for VaynerMedia and on a personal level, it's one of the areas for the next 6, 9, 12 months we'll be spending a lot of time just educating ourselves on in terms of like the world of frictionless payments.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things to mention, for those of you, somewhat off topic, but for those of you that are like, if I build my site, are people going to come, et cetera? Why don't I just sell on Amazon? You can do all that. But remember this, that 55%, according to Where to Go, 55% of Americans have purchased online over the last few months from a site they had never heard of before. Never heard of. I mean, that's just remarkable. So it goes to show you that the opportunities there, the consumers are there, the consumer behavior is there. And the reason it's there, the fact that it's there is why, according to Global Advertising Trends report from Work Data, brands are going to dedicate $58.6 billion to e-commerce advertising next year.
Mm.
All right, let's take one final question. And JT, we're going to have you on again so we can continue this.
Anytime.
David Garcia asks, best benefits of using Shopify as your online platform rather than any other online platform?
I mean, from my perspective, and this is the fascinating thing about the way Zubin and you and I, Jan, work together. Is you're so the site guy, and I'm the get them to the site guy. Yep. But then there's also the reciprocal nature of that. Once they're on the site and they transact, we want all the data back. The seamless nature that, and when you jump in here, Zubin, the seamless nature that we see of being able to get someone to convert on Shopify, get all the analytics on that person, and then the way it just feeds back in to be foundational to all of these social audience-based platforms is such an unfair advantage than other commerce systems have when it comes to actually deploying your media spend. It's the fastest way to get really clean, really rich customer data back into your models, back into these platforms. And we just see it time and time again versus some of the larger sort of more other enterprise commerce platforms. So from a pure media standpoint, that's what we see, but you go ahead for this one.
No, that was brilliant. I mean, yeah, there are many reasons, but I think what JT mentioned is critical, right? If, again, the whole point is scaling, you have the right infrastructure to scale. But again, if we go back to the beginning of the conversation, it's all around that data, customer data, knowing who they are, what they're doing, why they buy, et cetera, and being able to get all that information back from your e-commerce system and connect the dots is an unfair advantage.
Mm-hmm.
JT, thank you so much for joining us today.
Anytime, man.
We'll have you on again in a few weeks. Thanks to the audience, and we'll see